Senator Wallace et Nolin voudraient poser des questions supplémentaires.
Senator Wallace and Nolin wish to put some additional questions.
Tousaw, a short question. We've talked about, and obviously you have a lot of concern about the implications from the point of view of compassion clubs. The Federal Minister of Justice and the provincial attorneys general have had similarly a lot of concerns about the drug trade, drug production, drug trafficking, importation, and exportation. And as I understand it, Bill C-15 is the result of many years of discussion, consultation between all of the provinces and the federal government. And my understanding is that the ministers of justice from the provincial governments are supportive of Bill C-15, and in particular the Minister of Justice from British Columbia. And I'm just wondering if you were aware of that you did have some comments about the implications that the bill could have to the administration of justice in British Columbia, but the minister seems to be supportive, so I'm wondering if you're aware of that and if that...
I am aware of that. I am aware of that. I also am aware that you had senior Crown Counsel here testifying about the actual effects on the ground in terms of their workload, in terms of the backlog of cases, in terms of the length of trials, in terms of the denial of bail and the reverse onus provisions. I think it's pretty easy to understand why elected officials are going to stand up and support this bill. I think one of the speakers from a group called Law Enforcement Against Prohibition said, look, the war on drugs is not winnable, but it's eminently fundable, and it's something that politicians love to run on. But the reality is, if these are thinking people that have looked at the evidence, they know that this bill is not going to affect the drug trade in British Columbia, in Canada, in the world. It simply won't do it. The evidence isn't there. In fact, all the evidence that we have from every other jurisdiction that's tried this, principally the United States, which, by the way, they do it a lot stronger than we're planning to do it. And yet there's still a drug trade in the United States. And yet there's still lots of drugs on the streets. In fact, in 2008, the percentage of high school seniors in the United States who reported they could obtain drugs fairly or very easily was astounding. 83.9% can obtain marijuana easily or very easily, 47%, amphetamines, 42%, cocaine, 35% crack. This program of interdiction, supply, attempted reduction doesn't work. In fact, all the witnesses that have stood before you that have talked about this have said the only things that work in terms of dealing with problematic substance use are treatment and prevention. And yet this government is willing to spend an awful lot of money prosecuting, policing, and locking people up. And I just read the other day that another rehab center in British Columbia has been closed. This one serving the north of British Columbia. So teens with substance abuse problems now have to travel hundreds of kilometers simply to get treatment. It is the wrong way to go, and I think anybody that looks at the evidence knows it.
Senator Wallace, I'm going to put you down for the main round, if you wish. But we are on supplementaries on Senator Joyal's time.
Can I have 30 seconds?
Senator Nolin has a supplementary, and Senator Campbell has a supplementary, and I have not forgotten that it's
Mine is not a supplementary.
It's not, okay.
Second round.
Madam Chair, can I have 30 seconds, or are we too tight on?
30 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. Senator Wallace, I'm an elected official. I poll the public opinion on a number of issues on a regular basis. It's absolutely important. It's key that we do. But when it comes time to making key decisions on legislation that's going to affect the Canadians as significantly as this, we have to look at the evidence base. It simply cannot be based on the opinions of the justice ministers of relative provinces. I think that, and in regards to one of the questions posed by Senator Joyal, statistics, we absolutely need to look at the evidence, but we can't be selective in the statistics that we choose here. We need to look at the totality of evidence, and if you're truly to make an evidence-based decision on C-15, you simply cannot support this bill, not based on what you've heard and not based on what you know so far.
Yes, a very short one. I don't know if it's Mr. Tousaw or Lucas or Mr. Loon. You referred to the 14 years preventing your client, Mr. Barron, the provider, the sole provider of Mr. Lucas, to absolute discharge. Can you explain how the bill could could produce that.
Well, the eligibility for discharges under the criminal code, you can be disentitled to discharges based on the maximum length of sentence. So
Are you referring to Section 730, Paragraph 1 of the criminal
yes,
code?
I think I probably am, although I've never been very good with numbers. I saw several people walking in with the heavy black books, and I leave it to them. But you're disentitled. So, for instance, if you're charged with possession for the purpose of trafficking over 3 kilograms of marijuana, carries a 14-year maximum, you're not entitled to a conditional discharge. If you're charged with production, it's a 7-year maximum. You are entitled to seek.
Not, well, if it's a maximum, but not...
Not the maximum.
Yes, and once you have mandatory minimum sentencing, you're disentitled from discharges simply because of that. And so that's why, if this bill is going to go forward, I urge you to craft an exemption for medical marijuana producers, distributors, and, in fact, patients, because otherwise the two gentlemen here to my left could very well be facing jail for a very long time.
Merci.
Merci, Senator Nolin. Senator Joyal.
The bill, of course, deals also with trafficking and importing, as you know. I understand you have addressed mainly production because of your role, but do you have any other comments on the section on trafficking and importing?
I do.
Well, in a nutshell, because I look at the chair and, and she's just with everybody.
The reality is that this bill is not going to affect the sentencing for importing quantities of drugs into Canada. It's simply not going to do that. The law is already there, and judges regularly hand down lengthy terms of imprisonment for importing drugs into Canada. I heard the Minister of Justice come in and talk about how this bill is to target the high-level organized criminals that use violence and prey on Canadian society by importing poison into our country. I've heard that, frankly, ad nauseum. The fact of the matter is, it takes about 5 minutes doing a search on a free database called CanLII to pull up reasons for sentencing on importing cases to see very clearly R.V. Kenyon, 2009, Manitoba Court of Queen's Bench, 280, trafficking PPT, cocaine, and ecstasy, 40 kilograms of cocaine, 12 years. R.V. Marchese, 2009, ABCA, 304, trafficking PPT, cocaine, 7 grams of cocaine only, no criminal record, 3 years incarceration. R.V. Lee, conspiracy, trafficking marijuana, 27 months in prison. R.V. Smith, cross-border trafficking, 6 years in the penitentiary. There are not high-level importers of drugs into this country that are being sentenced to slaps on the wrist. That does not happen. It is not happening. And this bill does not affect the sentences that will be handed out to high-level drug dealers. It only will catch the low-hanging fruit, the very people that we hear that this bill is not designed to target.
In fact, it's going to divert necessary resources away from the importing and the trafficking of adults to youth. And these are the concerns when Canadians talk about concerns around drug and drug-related crime, which I suggest are more prohibition-related crimes. The importing into Canada and the trafficking of adults to youth is absolutely where we should be directing our police resources, or absolutely what we should be concerned about. But unfortunately, that's simply not what's going to be targeted. We know that from our current arrest rates in Canada, where 50,000 cannabis users are charged with personal possession every year. We know that from our police arrest statistics. And so if we actually want to do that, then we need to change this bill considerably so that it does focus on importing and trafficking of adults to kids. Otherwise, it will be drawing away resources that are desperately needed, as you've heard from our police services right now, who are all short of staff and short of resources. We need to be able to direct those resources to the areas that matter to Canadians, and those are the areas that matter.
Thank you.